My relationship with the iPad Pro seems to be a little bit of a roller coaster. There are times when I use it all the time, it's the best product, it's my favorite. And there's other times where it feels like Apple doesn't really care about it too much and I just kind of forget that it exists. But right now, I'm in a bit of a high. With iPadOS 16 being in beta, and I have it installed on mine, and it coming very soon, and the hardware of the iPad Pro being so good, especially with the 12.9-inch version, I'm excited for what the iPad Pro can do and what the future of this product looks like. And it's led me to do something that I've never really done with the iPad because you really couldn't, and that's create the ultimate setup. Now, in a separate video, I'll talk about my experiences with iPadOS 16 and the hardware of the iPad Pro, along with what else might be coming in the future. But when Anker reached out about some of their new accessories for the iPad Pro, well, I figured it deserves its own video. So thanks to them for sponsoring this. So for this ultimate setup, the basic idea was to create a desktop level setup, but just using an iPad. So that means an external display, that means a mouse and keyboard, that means every port that I might need. And usually, if you're using a computer, that's easy. But when it comes to the iPad, well, the options are limited, and that is until now. So this is what makes it all possible. It's the Anker 551 USB-C hub, and it plugs right into the Thunderbolt port thanks to that M1 chip inside the iPad Pro. And with this, it expands what the iPad can do tremendously, especially for what I use the iPad for. I think the main reason, especially today, to have a product like this is to expand what the iPad can do, mainly to another screen. With iPadOS 16, you now get much more functional external display support, and I've absolutely been loving how this is working. And this stand from Anker in the back has an HDMI port that you can plug right in and use that external monitor. It supports up to 4K 60s, and honestly, this alone makes this kind of the ultimate workstation. Now I have two screens for my iPad. I mean, that's a win-win right there. But everything else this stand has built in just lets you take it even further. Now, one of the main things I use my iPad for is photo editing. Every single photo I take and edit is done on the iPad. For me, the experience of editing on the iPad is just superior. You can't get a better experience, especially with the Apple Pencil and different software built in. And now that Lightroom and Photoshop are pretty capable on the iPad, I haven't really needed to look anywhere else, and I absolutely love it. But there are accessories that you need to kind of make this as streamlined as possible. The main one being an SD card reader. Well, this stand has that built in, not only a full-size SD card reader, but also a micro SD card reader, which you don't actually see very often, and this comes in handy. Aside from those ports, you get two USB-A ports, you get a USB-C powered delivery port, which can support up to 100 watts of power, so it can charge the iPad no problem. You get another USB-C port, so you can actually plug in your iPad, and you get an audio jack, which the iPad doesn't have that anymore, so if it's important to you, that's great, whether it's for headphones or if you want to have speakers in your entire setup. Well, this is the way to do it. So when you're using the stand, it actually feels like a desktop experience because the limiting factor of the iPad, that one port, is no longer an issue and you can really do anything you need. And this makes this setup usable. And it's something I've been using pretty much every day since I've got this set up. I have my full setup for video editing in my office that is much more elaborate and has a MacBook and all that kind of thing. But this is for, the evenings or when I don't want to do work. I can sit down on the iPad and still do a lot, edit my photos, reply to emails, do things around the house, but I don't have to be at my computer. That's exactly what I love the iPad for, but I've always wanted a little bit more out of it, and this gives me that desktop experience. Now, another thing that's great about this hub is just how flexible it is, because you actually use it to hold up your iPad. And it has many different angles that you can adjust it to. It's pretty much infinitely variable, and that's something I like, because when I'm using it kind of in desktop mode and I have my dual displays, I like to have my main display up top and the iPad down below, and I can, use them in tandem. But if I do need to edit a photo, I can kind of bring it in closer, lean the iPad down, still have everything plugged in through the hub, but then now I can use my Apple Pencil and get in there with the touchscreen, and it's just the best of both worlds, which is what I think the iPad is becoming really good at. And let's say you do want to, remove your iPad and you don't need the stand anymore, it actually folds really compact and you can just slide it on your desk and not really pay attention to it. Now, there is one issue with this whole setup, and it's that when I take the iPad on the go, I don't have any of these ports anymore. And that's where the second product from Anker comes in. This is the Anker 541, and this is kind of the same idea, but it's just completely portable. And instead of having a stand, it's just plugged into your USB port, but you still get 6 ports. So you have that HDMI port if you need it. You have a USB-C port. You've got one USB-A port. You still have a full-size SD card reader and a micro SD card reader. And if you still want your headphone jack, well, that is built in here as well. almost all of the functionality that you have with that main stand, you still have here, but you can just take it with you on the go. And while in the past, I never really cared to have a hub like this because I wasn't really plugging a ton in, now that I'm used to doing it at the desktop setup, well, I liked having that on the go for those times when I do need to plug something in, especially when it comes to the SD card readers. And this is just a great way to go. But yeah, these are pretty simple products, but they really elevate what you can do with the iPad, and especially the iPad you already have. And there was always an issue with the iPad, especially when they put the M1 chip in it. Like, what's the point? What can you really do with it? But when you get an accessory like this that can expand the capabilities of the product you already own, well, that's a win-win in my opinion. So if this is something you want to check out, I'll leave links down below so you can go pick one up for yourself and just elevate your iPad game.